Welcome to the podcast. It starts with you, with me, Vic O'Farrell. I ask my guests, by understanding their own behaviours and personality style, what impact on their lives, both personally and professionally, has there been? What is it like to live and work with someone of your style? I mean, this is not about labelling people, putting people in boxes, or an excuse for bad behaviour. It's about recognising, understanding and respecting that we're all different. And what impact can you have on others by looking in the mirror? Because it starts with you. So welcome to another episode. And today I am joined by the absolutely glorious Anita. And I'll just hand it over to you first of all, Anita. Would you like to introduce yourself, but also let the listeners know what in terms of disc profiling and profile that you have? So over to you.
Thank you. So I'm Anita Phagura. I am an inclusion specialist, a coach, particularly working within the construction industry. My background was as a project manager within railway construction, and that's what led me to now do the work that I do, particularly supporting women in male-dominated industries and other marginalised groups. My personality style has evolved, interestingly enough, and it may be because I masked some of that before, but certainly in my project management days was when I first came across DISC. And I often felt like this push and pull of task and people. I was like, I'm in the middle, I'm both. And I'm introverted, I am. So I very much present as a green blue. So steady with some conscientious, compliant type aspects to my behaviour and personality. When I've become an entrepreneur, it's gone a completely different way. And what I've perhaps realised is that, and I always had a bit of I in me, but it wasn't like my strong thing that I would present at work. But now I come out as an IS with a little bit of C. So that's the yellow and the green, and they push and pull against each other. And that so much explains so much, because often we talk about pace, but sometimes I'm quite slow and steady. I need to be thoughtful about the decisions I make. And then sometimes I just jump straight in and don't think about things. And in terms of how I'm organised, actually my C is very low. And so particularly when I became a business owner, I didn't have the structure and support mechanisms of work. And I think as a project manager, I had to do the spreadsheets. I had to really lean into that side of things, because it was such a task-orientated place, and that is how you're meant to do projects. But I was always bringing in the people side. But now that has really come out being an entrepreneur, and I've recently found out that I've got ADHD. So, I'm wondering how much is my personality and what's ADHD and what's an I. So it's all very fascinating.
It sounds fascinating. Now, so just a reminder for the listeners there, I'm on the outgoing side of things, very much what we would describe as an extreme I, so the extreme yellow, but under pressure, I flip over to an extreme D. So yeah, I'm a real Jekyll and Hyde. When I'm under pressure, basically. Interesting what you said there, though, about being in project management needed you to have a high C blue, the compliance, the structure, the rules, the regulations. Did you ever find, though, during that time, that you were perhaps a bit exhausted at the end of the day?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think project management definitely needed me to be task orientated, but a lot of project management and leaders, they were the D, and I kind of rebelled against that. And I was like, so therefore I felt like I was filling the gap. I needed to complement with the spreadsheets and the details. Have we got a plan? But ask me to have a plan in my own life, no way. And so was I exhausted? I think I probably was. I think I relied on those, and they were the tools that helped me. So I could absolutely do it. but I needed to be focused. I needed to put my attention in doing that rather than just letting it flow and come easily. And now in my own life and my business life, sometimes that's the bit that I really let drop because I'm just leaning into what feels good. But actually, you know, sometimes I need a bit more of that C to keep me grounded, keep me in the right place at the right time.
Mm-hmm. I hear you on that one, definitely. So what would you say it's meant to you now that you understand profiling, and it's whether we choose DISC or any of the other ones or the colors or the letters, what would you say has been the impact on you now you've really understood who Anita is, you know, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, it's been really powerful. So even the first time I did DISC, as I've said, it was one, just identifying that I can be both task and people. But what it really helped me do, even back then, and it was used quite bluntly back then, I would say, it wasn't like, I mean, I'm talking that I was both, but it was like, you're one or the other. And I was like, no, I'm both. I really am. So I was kind of rebelling against the tide back then, but it was used a bit bluntly. But even then, it helped me give those insights to other people around me and why perhaps I was clashing with them, why things were a bit of a struggle. And actually, I remember managing a high I and why that was a particular challenge, and managing a high C and why that was actually so easy, because, you know, that was kind of what was expected in the workplace in terms of getting the outcomes done. But it just made like the biggest light bulb, and something that I bring in now to my work, absolutely, and help other people understand. But it was really my kind of seed about understanding about diversity, which is the work I do now. It was like, oh, we can't treat people all the same because they don't all respond to that. I can't do, and I had somebody who was much more of a blue green, the C and the S, and so I suppose that I was still there because if I was given a project task, it was, here's a little bit of information, get on and do it. And I would actually find it challenging, but thrive under, oh my God, I don't know what to do, but now I need to go talk to people, work out what they know, and work out how to put all this plan in place and work out what we need to do and keep everybody on track. But then I realized, actually, I can't do that with certain people that I manage. I can't be like, here's a little bit of information, get on with it, come back to me when you need me. It's like, no, I needed to do that work to spell it out for that person. So that was my first understanding of, we can't just treat people the same. And then and I think some of that stems back to my belief that being fair was treating everybody the same. I now know so much differently, but back then I was a new manager, and that is what I thought we were meant to do. And now understanding my personality, and like it's led to so many light bulbs. It's led to me really understanding that push and pull of where I have those frustrations. It's helped me understand my relationships better. It's helped me understand where I need to plug the gaps and perhaps what I need to do to help me there. And when I spoke about like clashing with certain people, I could also see like sometimes I would really like rebel against that kind of D personality in the workplace, because it was like task, get it done, don't worry about the people. And I was always like, no, let's bring in the people. We can't do the projects without the people. But then I've also realized that sometimes I do have that D personality in me, but it's like kind of is there and it comes out when it needs to. And I'm like, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't like that side of myself. But they all have their place, and it's about the right situation and adaptability. And sometimes it's like, when I know what needs to be done, I remember there's one point where I was like, I took the pen out of somebody's hand and be like, let me just write it. And I was like, oh, that was probably not the best way to bring people in on the journey with you. And so, yes, those light bulbs have helped me. Like, and now I know I have got that D in me. So in those situations, when do I need to tone that down, even though that's not like my predominant style?
That honestly, that's made me chuckle, listeners. I had to pull back a bit there so that it didn't come across on here. But I always think of, you know, D stars, and we quite pick on the Ds because they've got tough skin, and you know, and it's like next, you know, water off a duck's back. And it's the hand gesture. And for those of you who are listening and not watching on the YouTube, the hand gesture of, the hand moving forward, like someone's trying to move something on. But when you just said, Anita, about taking the pen out of someone's hand, I mean, I was just like, that's not the Anita I know. But you're absolutely right. It's a trait. And I think we know we can be all styles. We can, when needed, we can be whichever style we need. It's just where we sit naturally is where we're, it's less, it's not as exhausting, it's less stressful. And so when you talk about a D style overused or a D style that's unexpected. So when a D is overusing their D, and I'm talking about that because, I mean, obviously I know I'm high D under pressure, but your D is hidden. When it's overused, can come across as a bit rude, a bit reckless, and a bit that'll just be bright, be brief, be gone. But what about when you say a D that is unexpectedly used? How would you say dealing with somebody that doesn't have that as naturally in their personality style, but then they start using it in a situation? How would you flex to be with that person?
I think it's a good one. And I'm just sharing with you, when I did that very D thing, and I'm like, I'm not D, but then I'll do that. And then I'm like, I need to, so I'm an inclusion specialist, right? Being D in inclusion's a bit challenging, right? Because we need to bring people on the journey with us. But there are times when I'm like, actually, that's my hard boundary on this. So maybe I will be more D about some things. I'm like, you crossed a line there. And so if somebody's unexpectedly D, I think it could be about the situation. It could be about, is it that particular thing that's hit a trigger for them? Is it this particular context? Is it the environment that's shaping them? I know that there have been times when I've stepped into that more D and very deliberately tried on that persona because that was what was expected in the workplace. I wasn't being heard. So I was like, let me go into that meeting and be more bolshy. And I did, and it was an interesting experience to say the least, because other people didn't expect it. So they actually laughed, laughing as I was, and they were like, "Who does she think she?" Well, no, not who does she think she is. They said it to my face. They were like, "Oh, I still think it was in third person." It was like, "Oh, Anita thinks she's the project manager here," and on this particular project, I wasn't. But I'm like, I've got a master's in project management. I've done that for 10 years. So, but I stepped into that because of the project and that particular environment. But it felt so unnatural. Not that I can't do it, but it felt like actually that's not how I wanted to be. I tried it. I didn't, and it was a lot of D personalities in that room. I was like, I don't want to out D the Ds. That's not where I sit, right? So I think it again, it's not inherently a bad thing, but it's like, is that you? Are you just flexing to be in that environment? So I think if somebody's an unexpected D, it could be the environment, it could be the topic, it could be their expertise and knowledge in that, it could be their experiences, it could be, as we've spoken about, they're under stress, and so that's what's going to come out. And I definitely see that as well with my personal life, that I'll just go into D when I'm it's not a high trait of mine, but I can do that sometimes.
And I think it's like we say, we can be all of them. We've picked on D because it's not naturally high for you. And I know, like, my C is on the floor. It's literally just, rules and regulations are merely a suggestion, and detail. But when I need to do it, I absolutely can do it. But I tend to do it when I'm feeling in the mood for it. It's not very often, really. But once a month, it does need to get done for the bookkeeping. When you just talked there, though, about the D style, and it depends on the environment and stuff like that. How about, though, when your values are triggered? Because you said about being fair, and you thought, managing everyone was being fair, being the same way. But actually, we've realized that, diversity, and let's take the whole D&I out of it in terms of ethnicity, race and stuff, actually just diversity in terms of personalities. You're right. Everyone needs to be managed differently. And we can read those. What we can't read is values. So if fairness is what is, let me ask the question first, actually. What would you say one of your highest values, one or two top values?
Yeah, absolutely. Fairness is very high for me and always has been. And I know you say you can't read values and you can't, but I think there is something in how people behave and what they care about and what they talk about and what their reactions are to a particular situation that reveals their values.
Okay. But it can also, when somebody, so if you've got a value that's a really rigid boundary value, and someone crosses that bound, pushes that boundary and everything else, that's when you can see personalities change, can't you? Like you say, so I'm thinking, can you think of a time when when you whipped the pencil out of someone's hand? Was that what was going on for you there? Can you actually look back at situations and think, yeah, my values have been crossed, that's why I'm changing?
So I don't think the pen situation was a value thing. It was like, I think it was maybe the environment. It was like, we need to get the project done. And I was like, I know what needs to be done. Let me do that. So I think sometimes it's the environment, but I think definitely times have been values. And you know what, the example I gave about that meeting, I think I crossed into that D because my values had been crossed about, again, some of my experiences, but it wasn't a fair environment. It wasn't. It was actually a really toxic environment, and some of the things that happened to me and I'd seen with other people, it was not fair. And in some situations, that can make me want to retreat more. I'm an introvert. I want to hibernate. I want to escape these things. But I was really understanding this value of fairness from a different lens, and particularly around gender equity. I was really beginning to understand and see everywhere the inequities, both for me and other women in particular, and also people of colour. And so I was seeing that I was being talked over in meetings, and I was seeing that my ideas weren't being valued, and I was a new mum I was a new mum at the time as well, and I was seeing the challenges and biases to me as a new mum who had, you know, commitments outside of work as well. And so I crossed into that D at times because I was like, it's so unfair. I'm really angry about this. But my D coming out as anger, again, it's still pretty rare for me. My D, it can do, absolutely. So it can cross into that D, but also my D can come out as a like my emotions and like the people. So I've been in that same project environment. There were times when I was crying because I was so angry. And then, you know, you had bosses being like, there. And I'm like, no, I'm really angry. And I'm not just angry for me, I'm angry for all the other mothers who are being treated so badly. And this is so hard. And I wonder, you know, I think that might be my S, the empathy and the sensitivity, and me, I'm not just treating that situation for one little isolated thing of this one small thing happened. I'm like, no, this is what it means. This really, and this is on the back of historic inequities. I'm not saying that's always the best thing to do, but that's how I would often see things, and it would be from that value of fairness. So yeah, absolutely, sometimes it could make me step more into certain types, and sometimes they were the less natural, sometimes it might be, I mean, I could step into all of them. Like, so with my inclusion work, sometimes I'd be like, let me go get the data to show you why this really matters. And then definitely the I from the people side of things and the conversation, absolutely. So all of those things kind of come into play when my values are crossed, but depending on the time, the situation, how I'm feeling, all those other things as well.
Oh, and so I'm always making notes about things, and I've just picked up there when you said when you're really angry and you've gone into D, you were crying, and you're like, no, I'm crying because I'm so angry. And there. I mean, how patronizing it when anyone says that to you. It doesn't matter whether it's a man or female. It's just like, I'm angry. And I wonder whether yet you're right, because your S, your green is so strong, because you are it's the stability and the people and the caring and the sharing, that actually, yes, that's how your D shows up when you are emotional about it. I know when I'm stressed and I go very red, no, I get very angry, and I have to have a word with myself, because I can shout to the next person and have no feeling. So for, again, listeners, if I'm on the very outgoing side of things, I normally live in people, but when I'm stressed, I live in task, which is the red, and it's like a red mist. And I know I've done it. I've wiped a atmosphere from a site before, going on site with my husband, and I literally have, because I've just got angry about traffic lights and being late. I hate being late, and it's the impact that we have on others. So when would you say, when would you really know that you're in flow, that you are being true, Anita, to your personality, to your values, to your boundaries, all of those things that make us human? When do you know that you're in flow?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my inflow comes when I'm both coaching and training, particularly around topics like inclusion, but also career development. I love all this stuff about personality and boundaries and values, because I know how much of a difference it makes to people. And I'm in full flow then because I'm fully in the people side. And now I recognize that is where I absolutely love. And yes, we do bring in some of the task things. But even when we're in coaching and and when I'm talking with somebody on what can be, this is not my zone of genius in coaching, but when it can be quite a superficial issue, and it's like, I need help with the action plan, and they want to do the C, that's not when I'm in my zone of flow. I can help them do it, but that's not my zone of like holding them accountable. So exactly when are you going to do that? What's the plan? I can do that when it's followed the real deep, beautiful discussion, and that's what I absolutely love. So I'm in my zone when I'm talking about diversity topics, inclusion topics, and sometimes that's just the conversations where we can get really deep, and where it's not a butting of heads, but it's actually let us exchange views and build on each other's views, and I'm probably bringing in some of my D, that little bit of D that I do have, of like, actually, sometimes I do want to, maybe this is the I actually, of I want to share my views, the ego side of things. But when I'm coaching, I just curb that right back, and I'm there to listen, and I'm there to support that person. So coaching and training is a really nice mix of being able to do both of those things. And like I said, I didn't really think I was a high I before, because I'm an introvert, and so I'm not outgoing naturally. But all those things that now I recognize that I's do, like they love talking, they love being kind of having the recognition, having the limelight. I didn't know I loved those things when I was a project manager, but actually I do. I love speaking and having an audience and having that response, as long as it's something that really resonates with me.
Yeah, but even if you're an introvert, it doesn't mean that you can't go out and do the people-y side of things. And yes, having an audience and loving it, it's just how you feel afterwards. Like, you probably, well, you can tell me how you feel. I won't tell you, because that's too I style of me. I know as an I style, if I've done a talk, if I've done a keynote or anything like that, I'm buzzing afterwards, and I probably will be for another 24 hours. But I'm extroverted. As an introverted person, whilst you enjoy it at the time, how do you feel afterwards?
Well, I think it's a real interesting one. So both when I do a talk, and actually, or when I've met a friend, or when I've had a real deep conversation, like I used to run a community, and we'd talk about politics, we'd talk about inclusion type topics in the news, and I'd actually be buzzing with adrenaline afterwards, but to the point where it's over buzzing, and I can do that, and I'm stimulated, and I can do that if I'm still out meeting people. But I find it, so actually, once I'm out and I'm meeting people, I'm fine. I can do that for however long. But then once I'm not meeting people, my mind is still buzzing. I find it really hard to unwind. So I need that alone time. And there are times when I'm like peopled out. And so I'm like, I need that alone time to just now. But it's not straight after a talk. I'm still buzzing at that point. But when I'm on my own, I find it really hard to unwind and bring back. And I just need quiet time. And sometimes I'm back home with my family, of my small family. I'm like, this is too many people. And my 6-year-old, now 6, I'm like, he doesn't get that. He's like, no, I will not give you any boundaries or space. And I'm like, I don't need to see any people now.
Oh, no. And I think that there's definitely somewhere to recognize, isn't it? And don't get me wrong, as somebody who is very outgoing, very extroverted, I also do need quiet time. Generally, when I'm doing the task side of things, like the blue, the C style, I have to be quiet and in my own space to do it. But actually, it's recognizing that different people do also then need to have their own space, when they need their own space, and how long for. I love the fact that you saw when you get home with your small family, but a husband and a son, and you're like, it's too many people. That's made me chuckle. Thanks, Anita. But let's look, as we come towards the end of this, I want to touch a little bit more on the whole inclusion part of it, because what's the saying, isn't it? The diversity and equity is inviting someone to the party, but the inclusion is letting them dance on the floor. How can we be more consciously aware of including different personality styles?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is an overlap with what we've shared about DISC that I think is really fascinating, with how we expect people to be. And when they do step into those stereotypes, they can be judged for it. And when they don't, they can be judged for it. So we have this around gender, we have this around race, we have this about other identity characteristics, because that's how society functions. And that's how our brains work. They make shortcuts. So some of the examples I gave were like, when I stepped into that D, people did not expect it, and therefore I was laughed at, right? But actually, there's a lens of me being a woman in that space, me being a woman of color, and these kind of things. Like, actually, was I not expected to have a dominant type personality because I'm a woman? And then when you are, you're judged for it. And there's a whole heap of things around this, and we can look at it from so many different perspectives. So the inclusion really comes, just like for the purpose of today, there is, of course, so much more to it. But for the purpose of today, it's really about breaking down those stereotypes. Yes, it's about trying to understand people's behaviours, but it's not about giving them a label because they step into a particular box or step out of it. And us not trying to mold people that they have to be a certain way in this environment. And you'll know this is, and I think this is a big reason why I do what I do, is that I felt I had to be a certain way when I was in the workplace and as a leader and as a woman. And actually, I felt like I didn't know. We spoke about the there comment. I'm not sure somebody actually said that to me, but it was implied. But the comments that I did receive were things like, you're a ball breaker, Anita. Maybe I was too red for them. Or, you're sensitive flower, Anita. I'm too green for them. I'm like, who am I meant to be? Trying to please everybody else. Or just even trying to find my own path with it. So I think the inclusion is when people are not having to be a certain way. They're not having to mold themselves to fit in. Because, as you touched on earlier, that takes the energy, that takes them losing their sense of self. And that is it's really sad. It's really we lose so much of ourselves because of that, but also the workplace loses out when we're not allowing people to flourish and show up as themselves.
Oh, 100%. And obviously the work that we both do when we are doing stuff revolving around DISC, it is about letting people be authentically them. And I know some people, I don't like that saying, but it is. How else do you say it? It's just, we're all humans. Let us be who we are, and you will get the best out of us. Put us in situations where we flourish. When we're in flow, we just give so much more. And it's irrelevant of what personality style you are, because as you said there, it's not about labeling people, putting people in boxes or pigeonholing people. It's just that recognizing, understanding and respecting that we're all different. You talk there about, someone saw you as a too red and someone saw you as too green. And then it's just like, well, who am I supposed to be? Because everyone wants to. It's just actually start by looking in the mirror at your own style, and therefore you'll be able to read others and flex and adapt your style to them. As we come to the end of this one, I think I've said that twice now. Amazing. I'm so you see, I don't write things down. I would like to get you to let the audience know a little bit more, like I say, about you and how they can get hold of you if they want to talk about this D&I part of it, which is such an important role in the workplace of giving everyone their space. How can people get hold of you?
Absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Anita Phagura, and that's spelled with a PH.
Thank you. And is that the best place for them on LinkedIn?
It is, or you can email me at anita@anitaphagura.com.
Excellent. Well, I shall make sure that all of those details go in the show notes too, so that if people want to get hold of you, massive DE&I mean, and we've just touched on some very, very small stuff, high level, I think, here in this conversation. So not only about personalities, but also that inclusion part and that stereotypical stuff that we do in our brain. I like the way you said we shortcut, don't we? So thank you for being part of this show. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. How has this conversation had an impact on you? What have you learnt? What will you do differently? Do leave a review on Apple or Spotify on It Starts With You podcast. And also leave a comment down below. Do also then connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. And why not even join the Facebook group It Starts With You and keep the learning ongoing. Thank you for listening.